All right, so I hope you gave that a good go. As always, the learning comes from struggling and not following tutorials. But if you did get stuck and you wanted to check your solutions, then this is the place because I'm going to walk you through the entire process. Now, if you're already done and you're happy with the result and you've tested it, then feel free to skip this video and continue on to the next part. But first things first, let's create a new directory called Wiki API. So inside my hyperterminal, I'm going to open up a new tab and I'm going to leave my MongoDB connection as it is, because if I close down this tab, then my MongoDB connection will still be active, but I'll have no way of accessing it. So it's a good idea to either Control C to exit or simply leave it running until you're done. And remember, whenever you close down the application, just close it down tab by tab to make sure that you're not closing some connections that you meant to keep open. So I'm going to go and open up a new tab. And here I'm going to navigate to my desktop. Feel free to create your project anywhere you like, but I'm just going to do it here so that it's easy for you to see, and I'll move it later. So on my desktop, I'm going to create a new directory that is called wiki-api. Then I'm going to cd into this directory, wiki API, and inside here, I'm going to initialize npm, and I'm going to add the Y flag to basically just say yes to all of those questions that always pop up when you initialize npm. So now that it's done and it's basically just added in all of the default options for all of those fields. And now I'm going to go ahead and install my modules. So I'm going to write npm I, which is short for install. And remember, I need to install body parser, Mongoose, EJS, and Express. So make sure there's no typos, and then we're going to hit enter for it to run its course. So now that's done, then we can create our app.js using the touch keyword. And if I run an ls-a, you can see now I have my app.js created inside wiki-api directory. So now we're up to here, and we have to open up our app.js and add some server code. Now, for time's sake, instead of you having to watch me type 20 lines, I'm going to go ahead and just copy the starting server code, and I'm going to paste it into my app.js and hit save. So let's just review this code quickly. We are creating 4 constants. We are requiring all of those modules that we installed a little bit earlier on. We're creating a new app instant using Express. We're setting our view engine to use EJS as our templating engine. And then we're going to use body parser in order to parse our requests. And finally, we're going to use the public directory to store our static files such as images and CSS code. The last part sets up our app to listen on port 3000. So we should now be able to use nodemon to spin up our server app.js, and it should say that server has started on port 3000. And now, if you remember, if we head over to localhost 3000, pretty much nothing will happen. And it tells us that it cannot get our files at our root. So this is because we haven't created any of our API yet, which is what we will do very shortly. But as long as our server is running and we don't have any problems in our console, then that is pretty much success, and we can move on to the next step, which is setting up MongoDB. So in order to set up MongoDB, we're going to use Mongoose, and we're going to say mongoose.connect, and we're going to connect to the usual MongoDB location, which is MongoDB : 2/ localhost : 27017, which is that default port that MongoDB likes to use. And then we're going to add a / to specify our database name, which was called WikiDB. Make sure you don't have any typos, as it's quite a long string and it has to be pretty much precise. And that needs to match with the name of the database that you created inside Robo3T. As you can see, mine is WikiDB, lowercase wiki, uppercase DB, and that is exactly the same. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a property that says use new URL parser in order to get rid of the errors that MongoDB likes to throw up. And then we're going to finish it off with a semicolon. And that line of code will allow Mongoose to connect to our local MongoDB instance. So now that we've connected to our database, the next thing is to create the schema for our articles collection so that we can create some models around that. So in order to create a new schema, we're going to create a const called article schema, or whatever it is you want to call it. And this is going to be set to have two fields. One was called title, and this is a string. And the other one is called content, and this is also a string. And then we can create our model by saying const article. Remember, this is usually capitalized and it's usually the singular form. And then we're going to set it to equal mongoose.model and then specify the name of our collection. So Mongoose will automatically change this into a lowercase a and make this plural in quite a smart way, as we spoke about before. And then all we have to do now is to just specify that article schema, which we called article schema. And now we're going to cap it off with a semicolon, and that is us done. So we've set up our connection to our MongoDB, we've created our article schema, and we've created our article model using Mongoose. Now, all of this should be intimately familiar to you by now, and if it's not, make sure that you revisit and restudy the database module previously, especially if you have skipped some of those lessons. It is crucially important that you've already absorbed everything in those modules before we continue. So that's it. That's setting up all of this, and I hope that you managed to do it yourself and complete the challenge using what you learned before, maybe referring to some of the previous code just to remind yourself. So now that we've got our server set up, we are absolutely ready to get started creating our RESTful API. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.